Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. It's a bit of a groggy morning, I must
Oh, it
admit.
is. Well, I was outside this morning doing a little meditation, drinking my coffee, and it was so cloudy and the wind was blowing, the north winds. And I'm looking at my weather map, and it's like a 1% chance of storms, 1%. And I'm looking up going, they look pretty menacing to
Yeah,
me.
you're like,
And
it's
no
actively
rain.
raining.
But yes, a happy day it is.
Well, we were, speaking of rain, we
Mhm.
were kind of chatting about that last time we spoke. We obviously, it's us, we get to talking. So we wound up needing the part two of the story of the skinwalkers, that experience we shared uh,
Yes.
almost a year ago, a little bit over a year ago exactly.
Yep. That's right. A little bit
And
over a year ago.
I also thought it was interesting how close we were because I was reflecting. We were there in August, right? At the end of August
Yep.
ish.
It was
And that's
the end
a
of August.
very active time
Yes.
celestially. So I
Yes.
forgot that.
That's true. I had forgotten that as well. But you're right. There's a lot going on in our universe, not just only in our backyards, right?
No. No. Well, and we kind of dropped off with the topic of honor
Yes.
last time. And
Absolutely.
we had talked about the lady in the woods. And thankfully we had also talked about that there seems to be some resolution there.
There
Thank
does
God.
seem to be some. Yes, absolutely. I'm very grateful for that. No one should feel or need to be stuck. So I'm very,
No.
very grateful that something has changed there.
Yeah. Well, and we were talking about sort of well, I wanted to get into, I guess, in more detail before we get to the part that sort of involves all of this wrapped together. But we were kind of talking about the nature of skinwalkers.
Hmm.
And I was sort of reflecting to myself, or maybe I can't remember if I said this on the podcast last week, but I was thinking, it's always so funny to me that everyone seems to, well, we don't know, maybe we don't know that everyone does, but that people survive these events, right? That they have this crazy, scary experience and they're run off of somewhere. But
Hmm.
everyone seems to concur that whatever this is, whether it's manifesting as a dog man, whether it's as an antler how they sort of shift in that way.
Right.
But I don't think anybody could deny that that entity could overtake a human that's probably startled and
Easily.
afraid.
Easily. Well, and that's a valid point to make too. Think about it. We get our information from those that have had contact, those that have had responses. If these skinwalkers were so horribly, maddeningly, dangerous and treacherous, who would be telling the stories, right?
And
There
they
wouldn't
might
be
be
any
different in a
life.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Mhm. There wouldn't be life left over to give the stories. So there is something to be said about the skinwalkers, and perhaps maybe they're not just only about the evilness of as they're portrayed.
We had spoken specifically, I think it was your son said this to me
Hmm.
first, and he's very gifted. And then also your nephew did. And they both, again, we can easily admit that maybe this is just regional to your land and the deals and the promises that were made there, but
Absolutely.
that they seem very sort of neutral until you get to the point where you are now encroaching on land. But otherwise,
Absolutely. Right. Well, and that's kind of the way people are in general, too. I mean, you're pretty good with each other until you start trespassing at 3 a.m. and walking in and, helping yourself to the fridge. Then there's a whole different storyline.
by
So
the end of this, we're going to look like skinwalker sympathizers.
I know, isn't that funny? We will. But, it's like all things. We have a preconceived notion that anything that doesn't look like us or looks potentially scary must be dangerous. Now, I'm not. Please don't go out there looking for new pets. Skinwalkers are
No.
not your new pets. They are very strong menacing energies, and I am not taking that lightly. Nor am I being flippant about it. You don't mess with what you don't know, unless you're very, very educated onto what the next steps would be.
Mm,
But you're right. They have been basically portrayed in all of all of history. Through the the Native American trails and issues there, and the problems that we have heard and read about through demonic energy through time, so on and so forth. They've always been categorized in that lump sum, in that big kind of pile. And there's something to be said about it. Perhaps maybe we overlooked really why they're there.
Mhm. I this is not my lane of study necessarily. And I know maybe I will seem ignorant to people who are really well read in this, but I wanted to ask you about. So there are belief systems around the fact that some skin or I believe that there's actually a lot of people who believe that skinwalkers are not are living individuals who have essentially made deals with demonic energies to be able to shift in this world, in this realm.
Hmm.
And I think that that's probably true. But
I
I al
agree with some of them, some of that. Mhm.
correct, but would you say that the vast majority of them that most would interact with, that they are in the spirit world?
I feel that most of them are in the spirit world. My understanding of it is that these are, again, energies that once upon a time likely were human.
Correct.
Obviously,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they once upon a time indigenous people, like we all are, and they basically turned into a different form of energy. Some say demonic. I don't really call them demonic. I feel they have a subcategory of their own, but
Mhm.
they are also there to protect their people.
I
So
just heard I heard
there's some
very
honor in
nature
that.
magic.
Right through the magic, the side of it, yeah, the magical side.
Well, it's in so we don't really, we don't really talk about this a lot because I personally don't love to, because I think I'm very against the use of the practice of this magic, right? But we also have to admit that it has been used, and it has been used very well with a lot of knowledge, and a lot of
Mhm.
knowledge that has been kept very private,
Yes.
because
Right.
just like any power, like any control or
Mhm.
edge over your enemies, you would always keep that, especially if it's accurate and it was effective, you would keep that to yourself.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
later we'll talk about the moment that you shared with me about how they keep their secrets with how they do things, right? But
Mhm.
I have a feeling that we really probably have very little knowledge about how they were created, about the deals that were made so that their existence could occur. I think
Yes.
that there is something that is probably very, very valid about opening a
Mhm.
conduit to ancestral energy that's a
Yes.
little bit unnatural, quote unquote unnatural, but it
Right.
would technically be allowed. I mean, if it's been allowed, there's something natural about that.
Absolutely. And so that brings us to another very gray area when we discuss their origin of skinwalkers. Many believe that the skinwalkers were being punished, that
Wow.
they were those within the tribal unit that were being punished and made to be wicked and punished through that wickedness to come back as a skinwalker, kind of like the undead
Mhm.
energies. And then there's other speculation again that they are doing this from more of an honorable place, that they have given their life, their humanness, for the sake of a greater picture, a greater purpose. So it really does depend on your perspective. Again, is one completely right versus being completely wrong? Probably not. There's never an absolute there. But I do feel that just like it, and I mentioned before in our last episode about the gargoyles. If
Mhm.
they were all nice and cute and had little pink bows and things, we'd all have them in our yard, right? We'd have all this, ridiculous yard art, of all these gargoyles in different positions, like the gnome babies. And so
And if you have gargoyles in your yard, please, we love it.
we love
I'm
you.
just
You
kidding.
love me. But and no, I love gargoyles. Don't get me wrong. But because they are made to look menacing, they are
Yes.
made to look like something you wouldn't want to see if you opened your eyes at 3 a.m. They do their job
Mhm.
because those that need them will have them. Those that are afraid of them will be better off not to have that power anyway.
Mhm.
So again, everything has a purpose to it, and they are no more evil than the cute little gnomes we see.
Now, when you have interacted with them, energetically, because I know you
Mhm,
have multiple times, not even just mentioning the
mhm,
one we're talking about.
mhm.
So I think you said to me one time that you felt like there was that they were like kind of half sentient, or at least sometimes. What did you where do you feel their sentiency lies? Because from the experience we had, very, very intelligent.
They're
But
very
sometimes
intelligent.
okay, okay, they are.
I do feel that. Now their behavior may come across as not being that
Mhm.
because their actions are again a bit unworldly, right?
Mhm.
We don't live in that energy, so it's hard for us to pin down. But I do recognize a level of intelligence.
Mhm.
I also recognize a level of humanness. Even though we
Mhm.
recognize as we should that they're taking on a different, you know, different place within energy, we'll put it that way. So when I have come into contact with them, and I am very sincere about it, and I don't want to sound flippant, because this isn't like running across, a rabbit running from path to path. This is a pretty very distinctive situation where you need to be mindful. In
Mhm.
some ways, it's about the equivalent of kind of stepping into, a path of a bear. You've got to be mindful, to be respectful, to not be afraid and run, but not to be antagonizing either. Except
And
with
to
the bear,
recognize you're
sometimes
not an equal
you're
ever.
not an equal. Amen.
Ever.
There you go. Very well said. I like that. Yes, you're not an equal. It doesn't mean less than or better than. It simply means you're not equal.
Well,
You
and
know,
especially
I
in a confrontation of aggression,
well, exactly. I mean,
you know?
really.
Lord have mercy on that.
I mean, just from looks, just on looks, based on that, I'm not nearly as scary. I hope, at least.
Well,
Skinwalker.
you told me the story one time about your nephew having a call from the cops, basically, because these kids reported they were on his land, correct? They had to
Hmm.
have been because the rules of the game, right?
Yep.
But what happened that night that he was like, "I didn't do this. I don't dress up for fun."
Well, something was chasing them through the property. He had to, they wanted him to know that yes, if they were trespassing, that was one thing, but not to be scaring them, not to be chasing them and terrifying them, and terrorizing them. So again, he wasn't doing that. That wasn't something, he wasn't dressed up in a Halloween costume. That
And
wasn't him
that's
at
the part that
all.
killed me, was they were like, "You can't dress up and scare these kids off your he's like, "You think I have time to do that?"
Yeah,
I
exactly.
do
It's like,
not.
really,
I
you think
can't
I,
do that. I
right.
promise.
I'm working 16-hour shifts. I don't think so.
Yeah, I've got a kiddo, I gotta marry, like, come on. But
Yeah,
that's how real it is because
it
nobody
is
just
real.
goes, especially in a small town like that, nobody just
Right.
goes to the cops and says, "Hey, I was committing this crime, but he's doing this to us."
Right, scaring us to death. No, I don't think that's what's happening. And for the listeners out there, keep in mind we're not talking about the neighborhoods in which we all are either living in now or grew up in. We're talking about thousands of acreage of woodland. There's something to be said for those of you that haven't ventured out of the cities. There are places where there are more trees than people.
Mm,
And this is definitely one of those places. And so there's a lot of opportunity to get basically to get lost and also to see things you may never ever see anywhere else.
well, and what's weird is I just heard in my head, like, it's those forests are like they're, metroplexes of energy. So,
Yes,
we've got
absolutely.
our stuff where there's a million of us like ants, and
Well,
energies like
absolutely.
that, they're like, "We're gonna be out here. We're unbothered typically."
Exactly. And if you realistically and educate yourself about even all of the different types of Native American energies that reside currently in that region,
Mhm,
and you realize that most of the reservations up north are in those areas, you begin to see that they must be settling there for a reason.
mhm,
It's because that's the property that they were originated on. And then we buy up the property as well. So it's not
mhm.
uncommon to be on sacred ground in that environment when really that's, your neighbors might be, you might be, you know, basically tree lined by, a reservation. So
Mhm.
it's not uncommon to have property that has the potential to have skinwalkers on it in that upstate New York.
I don't remember. Do you know where's the Skinwalker Ranch itself? Is that, like, over in the it's in the West?
That's over, I
Oh,
hope
no,
someone is going to tell me. I was watching it for the longest time and I cannot remember the region, but I want to say it's off either, gosh, it's Utah, isn't it?
okay, that sounds right.
I
It's
think it's
somewhere
Utah.
on if I'm looking at a map, I feel like it's left of us, but
Right.
I'm so bad at geography.
So that, oh, I am too, If in fact it's not Utah, for all you listeners, don't bash us with that. Just tell us what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, that's the thing. Well, I mean, this is more evidence of like we don't go and read stuff about. I mean, this isn't something
No.
we're talking about what we've experienced.
Well, and that's true, and we're happy to do our part, but recognize this isn't based on the latest and greatest educational pursuit. This is experience based.
Very true. And the reason I just remembered why my ADD. I just remembered why I brought it up. There is something that seems to be true in on that particular land, and we have no idea what exactly the energy there is doing or promoting or protecting, or if it is any of
Absolutely.
those things,
If any of
right?
those things, right. There's
Um,
definitely something present. And something or someone's or many somethings, it's hard to discern. The realism here for anyone who's listening or contemplating any of this is that, again, how difficult is it to believe that we're not alone? For me
mhm.
personally, I've seen so much, I can't even fathom the thought that we're it. So if you don't agree, at least take a look at this, an unbiased look at this, and say yes or no through your studies or experience. But there's a lot out there that we have no idea about.
You know
Now, I'm
what's
not going to start
crazy?
talking about Bigfoot because I think that's my uncle, by the way. But I personally, I've never seen my uncle either. So maybe it is, right?
They've never been in the same room. No.
Oh, all I know is he's hairy. I don't know. Or maybe his name is Harry. I don't know. But I don't know about Bigfoot. So I'm not looking at it kind of comparing notes here on that, folks, if you were wondering.
Well, I'm a huge nerd sometimes, and I was getting into there's this weird thing that happens in scripture, and I didn't know about. Obviously, I don't know about it, and it's wild because maybe the translation's off. Who knows? Who can say? But there's this two different stories. One where there's this saint who's been sainted, who is always depicted with a dog head, and
Hmm.
he was brought in from this other region of the world and wound up doing God's work. But what's weirder is there's this like letter, and they encounter these people of dog faced men, and
Yes,
they aren't debating whether or not they are human like or whether they're debating are they human enough to preach to mission towards. And so you're like,
interesting.
I'm not trying to say I don't know what any of this means, but then you've got the men of Moab with the cat face. You're like, we have a whole, if you are Bible literalists and then you go and read it, or especially around the David timeline, you're just like,
Yes.
dude, they mention all of this, but I won't even get into that. But it's just weird. I'm like, okay, well, if you want to go that direction, you don't really want to go that direction because it
No,
gets
no. If
way
this
weirder there.
right,
And
if
I
this
believe
is
it.
well, it's true. And so if you think this is too weird for you, ha ha ha,
Right,
we'll leave it
right.
at that.
Well, so back to the property. So backtrack to we leave your house. You
Hmm.
know, so we find out the house is active again. We sort of understand, oh, you said that there was an active portal in the back in the bushes. And you
Yes,
basically
that
were
felt like
like,
there was a very active portal.
and I was like, can you close it? And you were like, I don't, mm-mm. I mean, and you are very strong with your nephew there too. You know what I mean? Like there is a, we're not superheroes, and there is a limit to what can be done, especially
Right.
when that depth of darkness is at play.
Exactly. Exactly. Pick your battles, people. That's what it really
Mhm.
boils down to.
It's almost like you really wanna fight, and I'm not saying they're our boss, but it's like, when your boss is rude for no reason, and you're like, "Do I really wanna lose my job just to try and prove that I need to stand up for myself?" I think
Exactly.
sometimes this can be that way, where it's like, you really need to go to Goatman's Bridge because you really gotta prove that you're stronger than that energy, and then you bring that back home with you. Don't do it. It's not it's not
That's
it.
exactly right. Sometimes the most strength is in the least action.
Hmm.
We could
'Cause it
go and
wants
act
the
all
action.
yeah, we could go and act all Rambo, but the reality is it's probably open for us in the first place because we're the players it wants. It may not be interested in anything that just walks around.
Mm,
So really, I don't like to be coaxed into a portal by a piece of candy. Do you see what I mean? A
yeah.
temptation to go and fight the boogeyman.
Wisdom. That is why you are so smart. Yeah, because it's tantalizing.
It is tantalizing,
It's meant to be. It's made to be.
especially right, especially you look at that kind of thing, you're like, seriously, are we doing this again? Is this really what's happening today? Come on. I only have 4 days on the ground before I'm back up in the air going home. Seriously? So yeah, there's sometimes the least amount of action is the wisest choice.
And we did leave, and it was crazy because about 10 minutes away from that, your nephew started to have color, and it was very noticeable that he started feeling better.
Yes.
Oh, well, and 2, we should mention as well, he has never really had he never got to train with you, and so there's you would probably know I wonder sometimes, like, I wonder if he has the ability to shift it on and off as easily as you do, or how you kinda taught me to be more guarded.
I know that sometimes that is a struggle. We've had a recent conversation that sometimes shutting it off is not the easiest thing.
Mhm.
Again, he works in a very and I don't really want to tell you where he works because I don't he doesn't need any fanfare or
Mm-mm.
anyone reaching out to him there. But he works in a very intense position in upstate New York. He's got a lot of things he's got to keep a close eye on. And it would be detrimental to him if he started to become too overly focused with just spirits. He has to
Mm.
be very mindful of the people around him because he works with people, not works, but is in charge of people that are not so society. I don't know, society provoked. Maybe that's the opposite. They are society provoked.
Yeah. Well, and they are very often accompanied in spirit.
Yes, they are. That's exactly right.
That's something negative.
Right. Unfortunately, we didn't have any time in the early years for my nephew because I really never had an opportunity to get to know him until he was like 32. So it's not been
Mhm.
that long since we've had a good connection and we've talked to each other. And it was really fun to me because the way we started off communicating was very kind of bizarre for most people, but not bizarre for me. But I would get him on the phone and I would sit comfortably at home, either in my chair or on the sofa. I closed my eyes and I said, "Where do you want to go?" And he said, "Well, let's just go there." And so I would start wandering and I'd say, "Do you see that?" He'd say, "The tree," and I would be looking at a tree. And we were like, "Okay, keep walking. What do we got over here?" And I would feel snow, and he'd say, "There's snow." I'm like, "Yep, you're right." And then I would
Wow.
say, "Oh, look at that. There was a fire." He said, "Yep, it's to the left." And so we would walk around these places.
Were you guided to do that with him?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow.
again, well, these places, at times they felt like they were from, maybe a past life, something that we both had experienced and walked through together. Some of them ended up being battlefields, and it was not so, so nice, and wasn't all again puppy dogs and kitties, as you can imagine. It was kind of scary some of these places, but we felt very invigorated in the regards that we knew we'd both been there together because we would finish each other's sentences as to where.
And that is such a beautiful segue into kinda how we your master class. Wow, okay, that's incredible. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you did have these, like, almost Yoda in Star Wars where Yoda gets him for a very little amount of time. So he has these really intense trainings with Luke. That's so beautiful. I love
It
that.
was amazing. It was truly amazing. We enjoyed the ability to be able to really reaching into the past is what it was, to remind each other that we had been in this experience.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
that. I wanna
it's
dig
really
into
cool.
some well, so we get back to his place. Nothing
Yes.
really weird happens that night,
Nope.
and we kinda
It's next
forgot.
day.
Yeah, I forgot too that
Yep.
everything was
It's
happening
next
so
day.
fast, it felt like 3 days in one day. So I'd already sort of forgotten that we'd gone to that house because it wasn't really that impactful to
Right.
me. I'm
Yep.
sure you guys felt it a lot more. But the next day, I remember you and I, before anything weird happened, it was sunny out originally, but we did feel something was off that day.
Hmm.
And
We
and
did. Fell
felt
off.
that we were waiting for a shoe to fall that we didn't understand.
Yep. It felt very intense.
And so the days going, and then all of a sudden, like what we talked about, suddenly all eyes are out on the property. And this is kind of where I'm going to let you take it over because I guess it kind of starts with the drums.
And here you and it's interesting because remember during this time I had very little communication. with my nephew. We were experiencing similar activities. I have one technique that I use that I actually try to help people to I can tell those that are interested in learning that technique or not. I do a lot of work with the wind. I just do. And so the wind is a lot like my ally when I'm working on energy. So if I'm outside and I need to know where things are happening, I look for where the wind is still, and I ask where the wind picks up to be kind of like the guide of that, to show me what's going on. And so I remember that the energy, the wind was on the top of the trees rather than the center in the bottom. And usually for me, that's indicative of energy being there. It's just kind of the premise, like if you were in the woods and all of a sudden the birds stopped making noise and everything got very still, chances are you're either going to get a storm or you've got a bear out there, and something is settling down to let it pass. And so much is the same in energy, at least from my perspective. So when it settles, and you could hear drums. It's not uncommon to hear drums, especially in these environments, especially if things get stirred up.
Mm.
From my perspective, I felt like they were almost like gathering together, not for celebration, but gathering together as if some treaty had been broken.
Mm.
That was the way it was presented to me. And I do know, and for those listeners that think this is way over the top, maybe it is. Buckle up, sit down, listen for a
Mm.
moment. Use some, I don't know what it is, just have an open mind, use your open mind. But, one thing that we recognized is that my father was no longer welcomed on the properties because of the desecration of the burial grounds and desecration of hemlocks and all the things that would have been very horrific. I mean, you wouldn't go to your neighbor's property and start, spray painting their house.
Mm-mm.
This is, energy is thick. Energy lives on. It doesn't die. So the treaty that we recognized was that my father was no longer welcomed on the property. That as he went to spirit, and for those that think spirit just goes away and that's the end of it, well, I wish I could show you differently because it's just the opposite. They're actually a little bit more, potentially more live on some level, especially things that were not so savory and good. So
Definitely
getting
less
back to,
hindered.
yes, they're less hindered. That's exactly what it is. They don't need a bus ticket or an airline
Mm-mm.
ticket to get around. And so we know that it felt like there was someone on the property that was trespassing. And we know that on a few instances, and we've had a few situations of the past where they, and so these stories, I want to make sure the one that I'm saying coincides with the one that you're in your experience. And so we knew that there was a likelihood that my father was on the property because we felt that he had basically kind of, I don't go home very often for good reason, as you can imagine. And so, and I still call it home because it's where I was born, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I know that sometimes it gets kicked up a notch because I'm home and I haven't been there in a long time. And so we felt that he was on the property and they were hunting him. And we also felt that he was kind of making deals to kind of like one last ditch effort, at least for the moment. Probably why the house felt so active, my home, my growing up home, probably because it was really just kind of being watched by him and any of his cronies, his minions. So long story short of this, we knew that there was some type of war happening. Something was going to be done. Something was stepping up. You could feel it. You could sense it. It was the silence and also the fury of the wind on the top of the trees. Something was different, and my nephew immediately picked up on that. I was in the backside looking out through the pond, and he was in the front side looking out of the front of the driveway. And that's probably where you were asking him questions, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, and I want to add to corroborate some stuff too, because what is the weirdest about this for me was the day before once we got back to the house, I'd had an opportunity to ask him why he thought the house was busy. And
Hmm.
it was the first time I'd ever heard this. And he was, I know he was probably thinking, I hope she doesn't think I'm crazy. And I'm sitting there thinking, tell me everything you know. But he was articulating that basically when we talked about in the last episode that there was a new sheriff in town over the house.
Yes.
It was not your father's energy. It was a energy that had never been in the physical form.
Hmm.
So what was strange was that before any of this happened, your nephew had said, "Yeah, yeah, he's in debt right now." And there's a debt that seemed that and basically he was saying it seems almost like that his grandfather was in trouble and
Hmm.
that he didn't know what that really meant. But he said
Right.
if I'm answering the question of why is this active,
Yes.
and I didn't have an opportunity to tell you about that. I don't think because there's a lot going on, and
A lot going
so
on.
but I remember that, and then and the other thing is like you guys had 0% opportunity to discuss this amongst yourself once it was
We
done.
didn't.
And I
Right.
immediately was asking, well, you guys were sharing with me, honestly, in the exact story. I mean, that's, that'd be pretty wild for two people to really just come out of nowhere with this identical experience and the drums that you both heard and that feeling of, I don't know, the authority is here, step away almost.
Yes. Yes, and it's what's curious to me, and I've seen this happen in other ways, similar activities, but just in different timelines and with different minions. Again, a coward is a coward, no matter how evil he is. A coward still is a coward, and he was very cowardly in a lot of ways. So he was always bringing on someone to kind of be the fall guys for him. And so as he was making deals, I'm really feeling more than likely he had said, okay, well, you can have her or you can have him, and they're going to come to the house and take them, and they're yours. Well, we didn't play. We didn't play. We went over to the house I grew up in, and that he had lived in, my nephew had lived in, and we weren't going to do that. We weren't condoning the activities. We simply weren't responding to the activity while we were there as best as we could avoid. And so, his minion, which probably was a lot stronger than he was at that point, didn't
Mm-hmm.
get what he was promised. So more than
Mm-mm.
likely, my father had to hide, and he had a lot of property to hide on. He was a pretty good hider,
Mm.
and that's where I feel like we picked up at the house out of nowhere. And one thing that's really important, and I know this sounds peculiar, but if you think about it for a little bit and you take a look at it from an open-minded place, when you are connecting energy and you are seeing that there's a danger, or you're sensing a danger, and you've probably seen it in depictions of some of the wars and other instances where there's imminent danger. You realize that your best approach is to not say anything.
Mhm.
Your best approach is to continue to clear your mind and do your job. And what does that mean? If my nephew and I were sitting there conversing, well, do you see him over here? Do you see him over there?
Mm-mm.
Look over there. What we're basically doing is giving a blueprint to energy. We're
Mhm.
literally saying, "Hey, dudes, guess what? We got yous. We know where you are. That's where we're going to be," which is
Mm-mm.
setting ourselves up to fail.
Mhm.
So, and if you believe in the thought provoking point of that, if everything once upon a time was very telepathic, and that the spoken words was something we later cultivated, then you would
Mhm.
realize there's something to be said about being very telepathic and that it
Mhm.
has a place in our existence. So in communication, we would not necessarily say anything out loud. We'd say it with what we knew as it's like just, whether it be just a direct stare or look up or look off. That was our communication and always has been when we're dealing with these type of entities and energies. Does that make sense?
Totally. It totally does. Well, it's the only way. I mean, how do we do the work that we do? It's not like we're talking out loud to, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, but I guess that's weird to people. I get it. But,
Well, and again, energy doesn't know what we don't know. They don't know what we know
true.
unless we tell them, right?
True.
So if I go into an environment and I feel uncomfortable because I feel something is like standing near the fireplace to the right side, and I've got to figure out what it is before it figures out what I am, I'm not
Mm.
simply going to say, "Oh, I see you there standing to the right of the chimney." Because the energy is going to go, "Oh, she sees me here standing to the right of the chimney." So she can see, she's got a visual cue. So I know
Yeah.
that I can't hide from her. I better find another technique.
Right. And you might not be as attuned to the next technique.
Right. So I
Yeah.
don't want to give away my secrets when I'm dealing with something that is either menacing, dangerous, or uncertain of.
Oh, I don't think
And
I
that he
have the
doesn't either.
constitution. I'd be
Yeah.
like, "What are you doing here?" Before I ever could even
Well, And again, that's a natural response. You bet. You know, who is this? What are you? Why are you there? You know, after the initial scream or holler or you know.
Right.
But realistically, when you're working on that level, you have to just got to keep your mind closed, and you've got to keep your words few.
And your energy disciplined.
Yep. And you've seen that with my nephew. I mean, there's times
Of
that
course.
he will just completely don't ask him anything because you won't get an answer because it's not safe.
Wow. So you guys are happy because talk me through sort of the part where, and the reason we kind of brought up the girl was because she and this young energy, the energy of the young boy, that seems to have been the spark in that whatever this energy was, and this is what your nephew shared when it all was said and done, was basically we talked about the camp and the atrocities that happened at the camp in the last episode.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuck energy there.
Yes.
And then on top of that, this area is very rich with energy that is chosen to not move on.
Yes.
And so there's the Native American collective, which made a
Including their
choice to stay
youth.
because everybody in the tribe died. Everybody passed and chose to stay there.
Yes.
So basically, your father tried to basically get out of debt by trading these souls, the ones at the camp,
Yes.
and then
Absolutely.
and on the property.
And on the
So
property.
so here comes this energy that says, "Oh, this is going to be a buffet,"
Right.
and suddenly it wasn't.
Right. Clean up on aisle one.
Right.
Basically, I'm going to clean up all the energies. This is a treasure trove of souls. And it didn't work because there's one thing to, you know, they will protect and honor the inhabitants of the property that respect them.
Mm-hmm.
But, and that's one side of this treaty. The other side of this treaty is basically whatever you are, whomever it is, doesn't matter. If you attack us, all bets are off. And we will make sure of that. We'll make sure. And at one point, we felt that one of their children had gone missing in spirit, and it felt like it was a young boy. And so we knew, and that was the other part of it too. Again, we wanted to make sure it was known that we didn't do anything because
That's what's so wild to me because I remember when your nephew said that, and I thought I would never. I always assume that these energies are somehow more omniscient than they are. Like, how could they not know it wasn't us? Like, I
right,
always think energy will just tell the truth, but it's like, no, no, no. And that was the first. So out of the front window, he said that he shared. I don't know what hemlocks look like. I mean, to me, it just all looks like woods. But he said there's a cluster to the right when you look out of the window. So he said one of the first things I did was send my energy to the hemlocks and basically say, we feel it, we know something's wrong, we're essentially with you. What I
right.
mean, but
We're on
it's
your
not
side.
us.
Right, we're on your side.
Don't come for us.
Right, the
We
treaty's
got
still in
family out of
place.
town.
Right, the treaty's still in place. We haven't done anything. Whatever's here is yours, and that's really the way it felt too. You know, we can't say, oh, whatever it is, you know, just be nice. No, that's not what it
No,
is.
right.
We just say whatever you need to do is yours. It's not up to us. Because again, it's honor is honor. And we had to make sure that it recognized that we didn't set this
Into
in
play. Oh my
motion.
God. Because here you are from out of town. You are in that bloodline. It's all a little bit
Yes.
too nice.
Yes.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, I didn't think
That's
about it that
exactly
way.
right. And so we have to make sure. And I feel that when I go there, I have to, I do. I openly say I'm aware of the treaty. I'm aware of the agreements. I honor the agreements. I am friend, not foe. And so I always say that. Now, am I friends? Are we going to go and, you know, dance around a campfire? No, we're not. Am I going to be respectful and quiet and not get in the center of anything? Yes, because I'm not from there. I don't live there. I'm not on the property. I don't have free access. Even if my nephew says, have at it, you go for it, and Terri, it's yours. No, because I'm not the only one there.
When you say, you always say it, if you want me asking, like, who or where do you direct that to?
And that's a great question because people that, you know, I'm sure people wonder that, and I never make that clear. Really, for me, because I do work a tremendous amount with winds, probably more than most people know. For me, I go there and I open it into the environment. And I say, this is my offering to you is solidarity. My offering to you is peace.
Mm-hmm.
If you hear me, I need you to respond. I'm not going to go and go, please, please, please. I'm not going to sit there and be passive aggressive about it. I'm simply going to say, this is where I stand. I need you to know that I'm aware you're here, but I also want you to give me a sign that you understand what I'm saying. I'm not asking them to agree. I'm
Mm-hmm.
simply saying, hear me out. If you hear me, then you need to make it known. And for
I
me,
always
that's
love how
always the
alpha you
wins.
are. I always forget sometimes because you're very, very sweet in a but sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I forget. You mean business
Well,
all the time. I love that
well,
though. That's incredible.
sometimes you have to. And it
Yeah.
is, you're right. There's a place for both. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Well, you
I do
embody both
expect
well.
something. And if I don't get a response, then I repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
And I continue until I get a response. I expect something to happen that I can feel and go, okay, thank you.
What do you feel when you get that back from the physical world, obviously? But is there ever a sentiment of like, all right, fine?
No, I don't usually I don't get the spoken word because I'm not
Mm-hmm.
asking them. I'm asking them to give me my signal back.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Because again, even though we are on common ground, I recognize it's not my property, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
also allowed to be there. So I
Yes.
take authority over the fact I can be there. So I expect an answer that I can understand. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Totally.
So if I feel it. If I don't feel it in the winds, I'm going to repeat it. And if I don't get
Mm-hmm.
it, I'm going to repeat it again. And if I don't get it, I'm going to stand there until I'm heard.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's 2 or 3 or 4 times. But then I'll feel a rush of wind that has no place anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The rush of wind that hits you, but you look and nothing's moving but you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The thing where you have to move your hair, but you realize there's nothing else around you is. And that's how I know that I've been heard.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes total sense.
And then I feel safe. Then I feel like, okay.
You
But
can
I'm
rest
also
your
very
shoulders.
cognizant. If I'm going to walk the property, I also announce that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't just show up unannounced.
No, and
It's
there's a
like
lot there.
I'm going to walk further into the woods, continue to maintain the treaty, our
Do you
deal.
think there's ever like do you think there's ever curiosity if say you or him if y'all walk deeper into like do you think they kind of care at all?
I'll tell you, once upon a time, I did a very, very big ceremony over by where there was a creek that ran through where we knew that their tribe was placed. And the creek had dried up, and we did a very full on cleansing, ceremonial, Native American, tobacco, burning, the whole 9 yards. We spent a great deal of time making it a very sacred event. And at that time, I made it known who I was because I was intending to be around again. I wasn't intending to be
Mm,
one and done and gone
mhm.
because I have family, and there are
Yeah.
some of my family obviously that I like. So
Yeah.
so that's a good thing. And so I didn't want them to think that I wasn't prepared to be respectful.
Mhm.
That's why I did what I did. And they in turn, I told you, I don't know if we talked about on the podcast where I burned my hand significantly in that ceremony.
I've never heard about this ceremony actually, and
We
it's
this has been
amazing.
it was probably about 4.5 years ago. And I did this with a friend of mine who has since moved on. I'm not sure where she is these days, but she had flown with me to upstate. And Derek, my nephew, he and basically Carrie and I went there, and we went into a very sacred place, and we asked permission, got the first initial permission. We got permission for each of us, because we had to be respectful on our own personal level as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then we were told what to do. We did some chants. We did some drumming. Again, the communities up there, a lot of them are Native American, indigenous
Mhm.
people. I am part Mohawk. And so I felt compelled to go into, well, what we refer to here as light language. It was more of the ceremonial chant.
Mhm.
And it wasn't the war chant. It was
Right,
more
right,
of the
right.
peaceful chant, as you can imagine. We burned tobacco, and we put that on it in an abalone shell, which I was foolish enough not to bring a pot holder or a glove or anything to hold.
No,
Not
no.
real smart. After I've done this how many times, So we did probably a 45-minute ceremony, and I could feel them gathering. I felt it. I saw a young boy who actually turned into, I know for all those skeptics out there are going to think I've jumped off the turnip truck, but there was a panther that turned into a little boy that turned into the panther, and it kept just shape shifting in a tree nearby. And I felt that this child was curious, and he kept going into the panther so that, again, as a way of protection, it was like, you know, and so I was able
That's
to
kind of really
witness
cute.
this. Oh, it was adorable. It was very, very special. And at the end of the ceremony, we felt that we had done a really good job. It was basically to say, listen, you'll see me again. I mean you no harm. We're here,
Mhm.
there is a treaty, there is a practicality to this. I don't have any reason to do anything, I'm not a product of my father. I'm simply
Mhm.
an offspring, but I'm not a product of his doing.
Mm-mm.
And so as I finished, I had been burning my hand.
Mm.
I'm left-handed, so I had the shell in my right hand, and I was burning my hand, and I could feel it burning my hand. But you can't set it down. I wasn't going to put something on fire. There were dead leaves. The ground was it was a drought, so
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. Right? I'm not going to burn down the forest after I
No,
just gave
I
them.
think they'd be very unhappy with you.
I mean,
They
I
wouldn't I
just
don't know that they'd love that.
don't think they would love that at all, or liked it, or even thought anything good about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
And
when
then
I
and then they're laid Terry.
and they're like there. So as I'm walking out of the area, I still can't get rid of the shell because I can't put it on the ground, right? I'm in the middle of the forest. So I get back to the vehicle and I'm just holding the edge of it, and I don't even want to look at my hand. It's hurting so bad. I put the shell down so I could open the door to the vehicle, and I can't open it with my right hand because it's too burned. I had enormous blisters across, enormous blisters, and it hurt so bad. I thought, and I didn't tell anyone what was going on except for Carrie. I showed it to her. I said, I've got a problem. And she was like, oh my God. And they were that
Mm.
blistered already. And so I get into the vehicle of the truck, and I put the shell on the floorboard, and I sit and we start talking. And as we're talking and we're driving, and we're going to go treat ourselves with ice cream, because we're still human, right?
Right,
Got to go
100%.
get that ice
And
cream.
that's probably very draining.
It was very draining, very dehydrating and draining. And so we're talking and talking, and I just so happened to look at my hand that once upon a time had been burning and hurting and blistered, all blistered up. I could have counted with the big blisters. I was completely healed. And she was my witness to it. She was the one that also, and it was completely healed. It didn't hurt, wasn't red, there was not a blister in place, there was nothing. And I had been holding on to that shell that had been on fire for about 45 minutes. And
Dang. No, I did not know about this.
truly believe that because it was done out of love, in sincerity, in authenticity, that for whatever reason, and for the skeptics out there, it doesn't matter to me how or who or what healed it, but I'm going to tell you, I did not have blisters. And
Mm.
that was just a few minutes. That was
Mhm.
literally pulling away, getting on the highway, not highway, but on the side roads. And it was completely gone.
That's a oddly, if I'm not mistaken, that's an oddly, like, almost biblical theme
I
where it's
teared
like,
up
yeah.
because I had done what I felt was right. That's why we
Mm.
did it. That's why we did it. And I was in my way of thinking, I was being granted an answer to that by them healing me,
Well,
by
yeah,
saying,
I
you did
mean,
this for us, I do this for you.
well, when I say biblical, I don't mean, like, religious, but I mean, if we look at that as a way that they talk about kind of how good works, call
Yes.
it God, what and it almost seems like all of these people would go through these really horrible maiming experiences, and as doing their job, as doing the right works,
Right.
their gift on the other side of the suffering was healing of that. So how
Yes.
weird,
That's true.
call it whatever from whatever book, but work with the light has a tendency to do that. Isn't that weird?
Absolutely. And I'm a firm believer of that.
That's so
And
neat.
and again, and this isn't arrogance, please, because I really try not to have an arrogant bone in my body. I've made a lot of deals, and if I'm arrogant, then I lose all my gifts. So I try hard not to
Mhm.
be. Sincerely, I try hard not to be. But with the skeptics, because there's always going to be a skeptic who's going to say it's imagination, that didn't happen, and basically just kind of wish it all away. Oh, you weren't even there. I've heard it,
Whoever,
and
of
it
course.
makes. I will tell you sincerely and honestly and openly and authentically, it doesn't bother me a bit. And the reason why it doesn't bother me a bit is it's such a real experience and it's happened
Mhm.
on levels that I don't expect anybody to understand.
I think I
That
look at
doesn't faze
them.
me a bit when people
Oh,
disagree.
yeah, and I think sometimes when you embody that in front of me, it's I almost feel sometimes it's for me too, because it helps me with that feeling. I do get caught up and I do worry that people think I'm crazy, or like all the things that we've talked about before. And sometimes, when I listen back to us, I'll never forget, it was in the first episode we did together, and I didn't realize how anxious I was, but I also was walking confidently, but there was an acknowledgement, like, us having a podcast about spirituality and paranormal things. We've talked about before, it's might be a social death knell for some, but it's like immediately that first episode, you said, "Yeah, well, I got more than enough on my plate to worry about if people believe me." And you just moved right on, and here this was like a pillar of a concern for me. And you're just like, "Yeah, I just don't have enough time in the day to." And I was like, "You're right." And I felt so emboldened after that, because I was like, "You're right. There's two. We got to go do our thing. We're trying to do the right thing. That's all we can do." I mean, and I'm
And
really
that's
happy.
exactly right.
Like,
And that's true. And what might be right and authentic for me may not be right or authentic for someone else. But the realism here is when life gives you experiences, you have to be aware. You have to pay attention. You have to keep your eyes open. And when you start seeing things, and trust me, folks, a long time ago, I made sure I went through and checked all the boxes. Am I crazy? Am I insane? Am I weird? The bottom line is you get to a place after you've kind of figured out, you've worn that thought out, that you just say, you know what, I am this, and this is what I am. And
I
you just
think
stick
I'm
with it.
closer than ever before with that.
Yeah. And see, there's going to be people that don't agree with you. I had a client that sat with me about 2 weeks ago, and this is, I'll bring it back on the path in a moment.
Oh, no, you're
And,
great. I love ours.
his wife dragged him there. And at the end, he said to me, he says, I don't know what you are, but I'm tired of listening. You're going to give me nightmares, and pounded on my table and walked away. And I said, are you game for more? Or do you need to follow him out the door? She said, I need to go follow him. I said, okay, have a great day. It's just like anything. Like Merlot, you might like Cab. It doesn't matter to me. We're going to have a communication, conversation, and when enough is enough, then so be it.
I will come back to that because I have a comment about that. But, okay, so real fast, because this is the point where we're now that day. He's looking outside, you're in the back. Remind me again, talk to me about sort of what you guys were tracking.
We knew there was something we knew that the boy was being chased by whatever this entity was, but we also felt that the boy had been saved. But what we also saw was whatever this entity was. Now again, I'm not foolish enough to believe in what I do, that one and done. One's gone, that's it. All right, I'm gonna move back into the house, down the
Hmm.
street. No thanks, I don't think so. But we did feel that there had been, again, however you want to see that, my nephew is quite blunt when we did talk about it later.
He's
He's
so
like, you
blunt.
could see, pieces of flesh hanging from the trees. He said the top of the trees were raining blood. And I know that seems far fetched, and I don't know how one energy could bleed that much in the first place, but when you see it, you see it.
Hmm.
It's not to, we're not going, oh, shock and awe. Who did we just shock and awe? It's more of, that's what I saw, that's what it is, it's the way it is.
Hmm.
But we felt that it caught its trespasser.
Hmm.
And we also, at
Man.
some point, and I did feel that that he had stepped on the property. So in what I felt was that there were two energies for a while, my
Mm.
father, and also the energy that he had made deals to. And I feel like he was being chased by the energy that he'd made deals to too, because he didn't win.
No, that's a rough
So
day.
a rough day indeed. Yeah, I mean,
Yet he
really, when
got
you,
away.
well, he did. I do believe he got away, but I do feel
Other
that
one didn't.
the other one did not. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
That so and so there was one point too where you shared, and I was curious what they looked like, but you shared that as everyone was sort of getting their bearings, because there was a period we did say it was about a 45-minute experience from the rain where energy got really, really active
Yep.
to the part where we found out it was over. But you kind of said that they were almost like a kind of surround. Well, first of all, I overheard him say they're surrounding us. They're
Yep.
lining up. But
Yep.
what did they look like to you as they sort of? past you?
And that's a good question because some of it we can see not only with our mind's eye, but we feel them, see them physically. And some of them we have almost like a narrative playing in energy of
Mm-hmm.
what else is also
A
there. Let me put it that
knowingness.
way. So knowingness, oftentimes I see them. I don't see them as much as wolves because I have wolves that I work with. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't really present themselves that way to me. They may have pelts and have skins of them, but they don't present as wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they do look like, and people will laugh when they hear me say it, and I'm good with that. Sometimes they look a little bit like a werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which is a bit different than my wolves. Okay,
Yeah,
they don't look like
absolutely.
werewolves. So
They're more humanoid, right?
they're more,
And
yeah,
shaggy.
they're, yeah, and more shaggy and right humanoid. They can also have bear-like eyes. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they also can look like, again, stags, big bucks, but they're human. They have a human component to them. They look, and I don't I hesitate to say crazed, but they
Mm-hmm.
they have and I hate to say it this way,
Almost an
but they
intensity, though.
it's an intensity, but it's almost like a dead eye to human look. Does that mean, in other words, their eyes are dead as far as humanness, but
No
we know
soul.
that they're also right. They're more creature than man at that point.
Yeah.
And so they have both traits, but you
Mm-hmm.
can feel almost like a deadness in that soul level. It's different.
So if it's not, a soul feels quite robust, right? And it's always
Yes, it
jumping
does.
around.
Right.
So with them, what do you think? What's that driving feeling? Is it duty? Is it like we're pissed off now because hey, you can't take our kid, you can't take the girl that we've chosen to allow on our land as well? Like what's going on?
I feel, and I really do feel this, and I may be wrong, and hey, again, I'm a human vessel as well. I get the impression that, okay, we're not all buddies, right? We're never going to be
No,
playing cards together or having a barbecue, right? That's just not what we're there for. We're not meant to
mm-mm.
be mingling, okay?
It'd be almost disrespectful to play that game.
Right. We're there to show respect to each side, and theoretically, there's more of them than us. I mean, when you get right down to it, right?
Woo,
You
yeah.
gotta realistically, you got to keep this in mind, and it is about respect, and I do feel that that level of respect is created on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that they would destroy us in a heartbeat if we did anything to their kiddos.
Yeah.
I feel that if one of them got out of turn and did anything to Derek's child, they would turn on that person in their group
I love that. And
because
that's really
there's a treaty.
beautiful.
And people say, "What do you mean by a treaty?" It's an agreement. It's an honor agreement.
Yeah.
Do no harm. Those days are done. There is no harm to be had. We live in peace, and this is where we stand. It's really interesting because my son, he was in Minnesota, and one night we all were having weird. I told you about some weird things. We were all having within like a 2 hour window. We were all having weird stuff. Me here in Dallas, Texas, my son in Minnesota, and my nephew in New York. And
Mm.
it was all, we hadn't I started making, well, no, it wasn't me. My son reached out to me and said something weird's going on. And I didn't call him right back because I had to call my nephew, and something weird was going on. And something weird had just happened with me. And after it was all said and done, the thing with my son, he said, "Mom, we were being tracked. My friend and I were being tracked it's an abandoned fairgrounds because it's not
Mm-hmm.
really abandoned. They had an event, but everyone left
Yeah, yeah,
except
yeah.
they had
Seasonal.
things to wrap up. So it was a big, parcel of land, but it was empty
In the woods, right?
in the woods. It
Very
was
remote.
about 9 o'clock at night, between 8 and 9. It was dark out there. And he said, "I'm being tracked." And his friend, who doesn't believe in any of this stuff whatsoever, said, "We're being tracked."
I
And
gotta get.
so they had to circle around and get out of there because they felt like they were being tracked. And both of them got in the vehicle, got in his friend's vehicle, and his friend even said that wasn't human.
And then what did
And
Derek deal with?
he dealt with the same energy that he had felt that had actually come into the house,
Which is a no-no.
which is a no-no.
And then what did you deal with?
And with me, had I spoken a voice that wasn't mine,
Yep, 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 yep. Okay.
and that was
Dang.
never acceptable.
No. Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, I talk well. I teach trans tonight, folks. So I'll be talking in voices that are not mine, but there's certain voices that I never speak in,
Mhm.
and this was without my knowledge. This happened in like free will was taken away for a moment, and so all of that in the same period of time. But my first response was once I got off the phone, I went into. I was literally sitting in my garage. I was still in my car, and because I'd just gotten home and I'd been on the phone, driving. And when I got home, I sat there and said, "You cannot break this treaty. You have a treaty to honor, and you're not going
Mhm.
to break this treaty." And so, again, what does that even mean? Treaty there, great. Can't break the treaty. Minnesota, there is no treaty, but there's treaty with the family.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
See, it's not so much. It's also on the people,
Yeah.
and so that was very important to me to remind, just kind of speak it out loud. And I did speak it out loud in the car. I said, You don't get to break the treaty."
Mm. Well, interesting. So, you know, when we were talking that evening and the next day, and again, it's very fun because I feel that you can be very precise with your words, and I love that with you, and I take a lot of that on whenever I do the work that we do. But Derek is he's like, "Nothing but the facts, ma'am." And I love that, but it's also kind of jarring, and so but what I always remember so vividly, and again, I have a very acute memory, especially about this weekend. Um, so what he sort of, and it was so bizarre because you and I got to talk, and then I got to talk to him, and then we talked together, and that's one of the biggest. Never that I would really doubt you because we've had so many experiences. I came to you,
I
but
understand.
there is a weird thing, almost a
Sure.
surreal thing,
Hmm.
where you're
I would
just like,
hope so. It would
this
have to
is
be
weird,
surreal.
But he talked about, and I almost feel too that he maybe the way he experiences it, I almost feel is a little bit more immersive, perhaps because he hasn't had the training that you've had. Because you're able to, probably for control and power reasons, you're able to kind of sit back here. And I just even the way he shared it, I could tell it's just almost a little bit of a visceral thing for him. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, it is.
Because I don't want to put
No, that and that I understand where I know what you're talking about.
but so his side of it basically, and I'd love if he ever felt comfortable. But he kind of said the drums started going, and he said that's not a thing. It's never happened there. He's like, I
Only,
don't,
yeah, only
never
when there's
happened.
trouble.
And I asked, what's that for? I didn't, maybe that was a dumb question. He said it amplifies energy. I said, okay, well, why was it amplifying energy? And he said, when I looked out in the trees, he said essentially what he saw was almost a perimeter of protective elements, so like skinwalkers. And he said he said he saw what he feels were about 40. He said I've never seen that to that degree.
It's
But
a
he
big
said
group.
what he felt behind them was the presence of an ancestral thing that he said he's never experienced. And I said, oh, and I'm
Hmm.
super, I want details and I want them very specific. I said, so you're talking about, you must mean the tribe. And he, God, he's just so, he's like, yes, but
Something else.
yeah. But he kind of stumbled on it because he was trying to figure out what he meant. And I said, well, so was it, I mean, who was it then? And he said there was presence, but he said he said he feels the collective was only around 100 or so. He said, and there were more than that. So this was this isn't a small thing. I don't know, I can't
No,
stress enough because
not a
we're
small
talking about it
thing.
as humans because we don't
Not a
have
small thing.
a skin in that game, right? But we were there
No pun
together.
intended.
No, I know. I felt bad as soon as I said it. I was like, "Ooh, that might have been the like." I mean that very respectfully, and
No, I know you
I
do. I'm
think
just
too.
teasing.
I don't, I did not have the knowledge of what it really meant to be on that property, but I knew I was with you. And honestly, that trumps everything for me. And I knew, even if, your husband and I stumbled into an egregious behavior, we knew, I think our hearts are good and we were with you. So there was, But anywho, so he says, and then he felt when he checked in the first time that he was actively being ignored, but he was being allowed to see in a little bit. And he basically felt that there was a gathering and that there was decision making. And again, this goes into like
Mhm.
spirit works like we do, but a little bit more unhindered. But that's what always
Yes.
trips me up is, like I said, I always think something is more omniscient than it is.
Hmm.
But they were so alarmed and I guess frankly so offended at this energy being here, the
Yep.
presence of your father back, the fact that there had been bargaining done basically with their bloodline.
With their bloodline.
Like the offenses are just wild. But
Yes.
and then he said, and then he was shut out completely. So they basically, he basically was like, it was not us, and they basically were like, we're so unconcerned with you, but we are addressing it. It's being
Right.
addressed,
Well, that's
and
true.
it felt it, and that they were present. And then the next, I remember I asked you on a different conversation, what was the need of the perimeter? And you said, well, they weren't going to let him go. I was like, dang, yeah, you're right.
Not at all. And it's curious because I have heard the drums at the house before. I heard
At
them a
your
lot
house or
when
when
I
you're
was growing up. I used to hear the drums.
really?
In fact, I
Dang.
used to play with them. I used to sit, and I know this sounds, I was young. I would sit on top of
Yeah.
the doghouse. We used to have dogs outside. They weren't allowed inside. And I would sit in the doghouse and I would straddle the doghouse and I would use the side of the doghouse to beat drums with them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang. And then you were called Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Deep cut from the book, Altered Grace. Get it at
Yeah.
anywhere you get books, y'all. It's an amazing read, and it'll elucidate a lot about this family we're talking about, frankly.
It's
Man,
a
I forgot.
very,
I reread
very
that when we started this podcast. It was so good. I forgot how good it was.
scary. Don't read it before bed.
True. And so then, and I want to get, because I love this experience, and I love the narrative, even though, again, like you said, people could be like, oh, you're crazy. But to me, the narrative, the understanding of what was happening is what's profound too.
Yes.
So the drums are going, the girl is now with them, which what was fascinating was, Derek basically told me the day before, because I was asking about all this stuff. And he said, well, they don't hang out. They don't exist in spirit in the same place, but
Mm-mm.
they allow her to be in proximity. There's
Yes.
and she didn't seek them out either. And
No.
apparently
Mm-mm. No.
that was
Mm-mm.
who she went to as an authority when
Right.
all this started happening.
Right.
And so they allowed her to kind of join them in time and space, which doesn't really happen. Not because she can't, but neither side's interested in that. And yet
Exactly. Right.
here,
That's right. They're not buddies. No one is
yeah.
friends. These are not buddies.
But how beautiful to, we don't know. We can't say that the Native Americans walked in the light. We know that they have a skinwalker presence. I could imagine if they were pissed about what happened and they said, we're all dying. Like let's make sure this matters. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like so I'm not, no one's saying they are, but I am saying how beautiful that there could be something so nefarious that then everybody is like, no. We are together in this, and we will be protective, and we will take care of this.
Exactly. And that's pretty much the way it is in a nutshell. That's exactly what it is.
And so then y'all are allowed to see the chase basically where he kind of gets triangulated.
Mm-hmm.
And but what I felt was fascinating was you and he both said that right at the period of time that it fell over, you both stopped being able to see. So it was almost like pure vision to
Yep.
nothing.
Yep.
And then as you guys were closed out, that's when we all heard the yell.
Yes, we did.
And I honestly, the ego in me, I was so glad I got to hear the yell, because then I was like, I
You
didn't
heard
get to
it too.
share
Yes,
this
you
experience,
did.
but it was quite painful. And
Yes.
it wasn't high pitched like you would thought, like I would have
Nope.
thought.
No.
So then, and then that's when you shared, we were all kind of still quiet. I was like, did you hear that? And you said, yeah. And then you looked, you said she heard it. So and nobody else did. And then you were still quiet. The mood was still very tight. And then
Mm-hmm.
I heard you say, it's done. And he said, yeah, it's done. And you basically felt, and I think this is fascinating because it just lets us know we're not equal players here. You said that or maybe it was him that said this, I can't remember. One of y'all said that the way that they dismantled, basically, they took a demonic energy that's purely sentient in its own right and powerful enough to be commanding your dad around and powerful enough to take over that house, which is very active and not probably easy to take over, so to speak,
That's
because you got
right.
to fight for that. It's always a brawl with those energies.
It's always a brawl.
It's always classy. No, but they did something to where they basically completely tore the energy apart.
Yes. Right.
And
Dismantled.
for you, you both were basically able to see this carcass in a tree and the blood raining, and that was them basically saying, yes, here's because you bet you didn't you bet you asked, you said, please give us confirmation that this is done.
That's exactly right. Give us
And
confirmation. That's the thing along the way. We do, I ask for confirmation. That's why I play with the wind so much. I want to know this is what it feels like. This is what I'm sensing. This is what I'm seeing in energy. Give me feedback. And I want it to be clear feedback. I want it to be feedback that I can know that, okay, this is it.
mm-hmm.
And if I can hear for others, they should be able to hear for me, right? In that
Mm-hmm.
regards. Because it is a matter of, sensibilities. Am I safe? Am I not safe? Tell me what's going on around me.
Well, and you're a very combative, like warrior energy too. So there's a part where you're like, do I need tell me if I can take my armor off? Help me, because I got
Right.
my family here and they don't know what's going on.
Right.
So
That's
we
exactly right.
also feel protective too.
Yep.
And for me, what I felt was it just looked like a shadow, like a cloth being torn apart, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing gory at all. Which was, then I didn't ask. I just was like, what was that yell? And that's what I was taken to. So,
Yeah, it was a pretty
God.
noticeable yell. It was very loud.
Now I can't remember. Now I'm blanking. And Derek did hear it, right?
He did. The three of us
Okay,
heard
yeah,
it.
yeah. So wow. Okay, and I just want to say too, thank you always so much for sharing this publicly, for letting us talk about it. To me, it was a profound experience. For you, it's a bloodline thing, it's a family thing, and I know that's private. And so I was thinking, I'm so grateful that you're willing to just get on here and be like, let's just talk about this wild experience that's personal for you.
Well, and it is very personal for me. One thing I wanted to put in there as well along the ways, going back a few steps into when we did the ceremony and through the hemlocks.
Mm-hmm.
Later we did take some pictures of the hemlocks. And there's a beautiful purple hue that I actually show these pictures at my in my paranormal classes that I teach with Night Eye Paranormal. Uh,
We're gonna have him on the
because
pod.
yes, because the purple hue was very indicative of kind of like I feel more for me, more for the human side of those viewing it. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they lived happily ever after. That's not what that was, but it was more of the purple energy was what we shared with them. It was the spiritual side to let them know that we meant it. We meant to be honorable. And I feel like that was the response back with the purple mist. It's beautiful. And it didn't come in every picture. So it's not like, oh my gosh, it's doctored up or it's this or that or
No, no,
whatever.
no, no.
It was actually a deer camera that picked it up, and it was
I
quite
love that.
remarkable.
Well, also too, I'm sure you picked up on this as well, but for the listeners, and I know this wasn't intentional because I mean, whether it is or not, I guess it's irrelevant. But in this case, it wasn't. But we do recognize that when it comes to imbuing an intention or a thought form with power, a lot for some reason, our more intense emotions, pain, grief, they have
Yes.
more oomph to them.
Yep.
And so it is very beautiful that here you were basically making a promise,
Hmm.
and that while accidentally, or in this case accidentally, but it very well could have been on purpose in a different world, where you
Yes.
said, I'm willing to also give to you life force, because that's what it is. To receive
It's life
injury is
force.
to
Yes.
give life force, and yet then for them to say, no, we don't need that from you, but thank you.
Right.
That's crazy. I mean, that's beautiful. Like,
It
call
is.
them gray, how
It's
I love,
beautiful.
this is my question too in spirituality, because how often do you walk up to them and say, are you good enough for me to interact with you, right? Like, do you do enough good things that I can know you? But sometimes we want that from spirit, and maybe it's not always that clear. And I'm not saying
Not
don't
always
chase
that
down the
clear.
Don't knock down the demonic door. I promise you're gonna find something you do not want. But in these cages where it's more nature, where
Yes.
there is a neutrality there until it's desecrated or until
Yes.
it's made sacred.
That's
See,
true.
those are the
Or
same
until it's
root,
made
right?
sacred. Right.
God, I'm so grateful. Like, I'm thankful that there do seem to be some natural checks and balances. Oh, but what I was
They're
getting at, oh my gosh, back to so when he was ripped apart, the reason it was blocked out, and I love this for them, I guess, the magic or the experience or the process that which they did that, they covet that knowledge. And they're not gonna ever share that. And so what I love is I'm grateful if they're not gonna share it with us, then I'm grateful that there is something out there that can and knows how and will.
absolutely.
That's
Yes.
dope. Like that is,
It is.
and I know we have a lot of authority in the light. So I know that there's ways to do it as well. But to know that the earth itself has maintained a way to function this way,
That's
I'm
right.
pretty grateful.
Well, I'm grateful as well. And when things went blank, I was happy for that as well. Because I
Why?
don't really need to see that either. I
No.
mean, energy's energy, but there's a lot of visuals out there that stay embedded.
Yeah. No,
So
I
that
feel
was
that.
actually a very they were protecting their secrets, but they were also, in doing so, they also helped us not to have to see something.
When I just realized, I'm so flippant sometimes. I just realized too, the amount of darkness it would take to rip apart darkness. Is it, or would it be, God,
Yes,
who knows?
you
Yeah.
picked up on that. That's right. To eradicate the darkness, you have to be worse than the dark,
Because I was gonna
right?
say, I don't think they can channel the light. I don't know that that's their wheelhouse. Oh boy. Well, thank goodness that they're on they're with you and by proxy.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I'm
Wow.
grateful for that as well.
I'm curious. 0 out of 10. How anxious or like high strung were you actually? Because for me, watching you both, I was gonna say a steady 2, 3 on either of y'all, but I
I
bet
wasn't
it was more.
anxious. I was hyper alert. I wasn't feeling anxiety. I was feeling almost like the feeling when you're ready to for the next step, whatever it is, and you're not sure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's that very hyper alertness. It's the adrenaline rush that gets you where you're ready and you're going to pounce if you need to pounce.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have taken very little for a response. So I wasn't really anxious. And I mean, afterwards I was more anxious because when it's all said and done, obviously your cortisol's return, your endorphins are back to normal. But during that state of the heightened state, it's a pretty overwhelming. Not, I don't want to say overwhelming. That's not even, and that's not really what it is. It's intense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's more, we have a responsibility and expectation to manage the physical world,
Yes.
but we aren't always like that's draining. And that's
Draining.
very, because
It's
now you're aware
draining.
of both. You've got your husband and your sister and your niece and your niece's baby in the other room. So
Hmm.
we're managing the physical world. And then there's almost like this attention that is like, we're double duty for a second. Well, you guys were. I feel like I was very, very on edge, but because I was reading y'all, um, I couldn't, I couldn't get hardly anything energetically
And
other than
that's
just the heightened
okay.
energy and the anxiety. But it
It's
was so
okay.
beautiful too.
Sometimes it's okay not to walk that walk.
Yeah. No, I'm very grateful too because I'm a baby. You saw me in Louisiana. Come on.
You did fine. You did fine. Yeah, well, you saw me in the escape rooms. My gosh, I was looking at all the pretty stuff. I'd have been there for years. No one would have let
It
me
was,
out. I was like clueless for the clues, I'll tell you.
I just love. I was telling my friends about that again the other day. I was thinking I got the Michelin star version of these, and I've never really done them before. So thank you so much for that experience.
Well, I'm glad I was able to be a part of that experience. I
That was
realized that I
beautiful.
am not really cut out to do the escape rooms.
And Spirit didn't seem motivated to help.
Just wanted to hang out and look around. I was like, whoa, this is cool. I wonder what else is here with me. Oh, look at this.
I did feel. I don't know who it was in my team in Spirit, but I did feel quite a bit of entertainment.
Yes.
Like that they were just there was just a lot of pleasant fun
Yep.
with it,
That's what,
but
yes.
zero motivation to help. So
Yeah, very, very little motivation to help. Totally get that. I know. That's what I mean. I mean, if I'd have been there totally by myself, I'd still be there. I'd be
dude,
just
it was
sitting there,
beautiful.
looking at it, going, "Look at that! It's so pretty."
But man, we have done it once again. I am
My gosh,
so
we have done
grateful.
it again, and that was wonderful.
What a
I
fun
enjoyed this.
experience. And I'm so
It was
glad that we
fun.
got a chance to I didn't know if we'd ever talk about that on the podcast, but it was just it's one of the most incredible experiences I've experienced. I got to debrief it with you guys, which was magical to see the two different perspectives. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about the paranormal here and sort of bringing to light what's possible. And it's so funny because here, I'm in March 1st, I was thinking, okay, we'll keep it normal and we won't isolate everybody. And then here it's like, well, no, we're gonna bust it open, and
We're gonna
we're gonna
bust it
have
open. We're going
we're gonna have
normal, but we're going paranormal.
well, because and I was thinking about that too. I was thinking, a lot of the work that you and Night Eye Paranormal, that's a big part of what we do,
It
what you
is.
do, and so I would hope to. I know I kind of pulled out of that because I was scared. I got kind of nervous,
It's
but I
okay.
was thinking, I was like, I do. That's something I'm going to be talking with Taylor, to see because I do want to experience some more of that and have more,
Right.
especially with clearing as well. That's
Yes, it's very
something learning
important.
more about that.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
it's one of
clearing
those
is
things
very
where
important.
we're going to be walking another year together. We're going into December, and I'm
No,
just
isn't
so
that great?
grateful.
I'm so grateful as well. It's going by fast. I'm so excited for each day, every moment of it. But
I'm ready for
yes,
the year to be over, though. I'm not gonna lie. I'm 2025. I think I'm ready. This year has been interesting, but it's been a bit of a whammy. So
well, it
I'm
has been a
excited
bit
for
of
the
a
new year.
whammy. I'm right there with you. It's been up and down, a little bit of a roller coaster ride, and I'm never really one for roller coasters.
No, nope, me either.
But I'm excited. One, I'm excited just to be alive, and
Yeah,
at least for
begin it
now,
again.
right. So it's been a rough year in some on some levels and some planes, but I am glad. This time last year, I was so incredibly sick. So I'm grateful
Wait,
that
I
I'm not
forgot
incredibly
that.
sick right now.
Yeah,
That's a
yes.
blessing. I'm not sick at all. So I imagine that those are coming to my class tonight. Don't worry, I'm not giving you nothing other
How's
than
your
my
new
time.
car?
Oh, I love my car. Love my
Good.
car. That was a blessing. It's just everything at once, as always. That's the way we usually are dealt as humans. Get it all done at once, and then get 3 months of confidence building, and then everything falls apart again.
No. We listen, we're gonna make it through. I
We
always
are.
just try to put my head down and speed to January 1st, and I think it's gonna be
Well, I'm
I'm
definitely going to
excited.
eat. I am too. I'm going to eat my way to January 1st.
Yes, me too.
I'm a big, huge holiday person. October through the end of December 31st.
Yay.
I love the holidays. I'm a festive soul, and so if you've tried to book with me and I've been overbooked, I'm too bad. Try
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Just kidding.
You should
No,
call
I
her
just
6
love it.
times, not 5.
Yeah, let's go there. Don't go there.
Well,
But
I'm
no,
going to let you go because I
yes,
know that you have many things to do today.
I
You're
do. I
always
have a
so
really, really
busy.
busy day. It's going to keep me moving and shaking till about 10 p.m. So I'm excited.
I admire you always.
Well, I'm admired that I still have my wits about me and I still can maneuver and make it around for till 10 p.m.
Well, I love you so much, and
I love
I'm
you
so
so
grateful that
much.
we talked about that.
I love it.
So
Let's
much
people
fun.
let's grow and know, if this seems too strange for you, give us another chance. Keep an open mind.
Or
Sometimes where the
don't,
weird
that's
things
okay
are is
too.
where we are. We can't help it. It's just nature.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and I'm so excited because I have so many
Me
questions for you. It's gonna be a fun
too.
fun ride.
I love it's a
All right,
fun,
my
fun ride.
love, we will
Happy
be talking soon.
Thanksgiving too for all of those
Yes.
out
Oh
there.
my god. I'll see you
Happy gobble
Thanksgiving.
gobble. I know.
So, oh, by the way, now we're just talking. I'm gonna go to my work's Thanksgiving soccer game, and then I'm gonna come over right after that.
I love it. Sure. I have no idea what time that is,
Yay!
but sure, that works
It'll
well.
be like in the mid afternoon.
It's fun. I'm just
Oh, okay, okay. Yay! I'm so excited. I look forward to that so so much.
well, me too.
Like with you, not the soccer game, but the
It's
day with you.
okay. I like soccer too.
I would like to
Just
say
not
that.
good at it.
I love you,
Love you,
and
love you,
we
love
have
you.
done it. I'll see you next
Yes, we've
week.
done
I'll
it.
see you Thursday, but we'll shoot next week. Yeah.
Bye.
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 Take care.
You too.